let's call this meeting to order. It's actually now 2:31 p.m. on the 14th of April, 2016. This is the AMATS Technical Advisory Committee for all those in the audience. Hopefully you're in the right place. Yeah. The right place. What do you say?
I said I want to get on the meeting.
I know.
I want to meeting, sorry.
First up, roll call. Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Martin.
Hello.
Ms. Witt. Here. Mr. Rudolph, sitting in for Ms. Carr. I know. Yeah. I had to say it. And I am here. So we are recording right now. Sharon Walsh did tell me she's going to be a few minutes late, but she should be here. So.
And Mr. Hart is out of town.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, would you mind to tell us a little bit?
All AMATS meetings are public meetings, and the public is invited to comment. We have a business item, we'll have a presentation by staff or consultant, and then the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. First thing ahead of us is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We do have minutes in front of us for last month's meeting, March 10th, 2016. It was kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody other than Alex was here.
Members don't need to be here in order to vote on this.
Okay. What about the nominated?
Still participate in the motion.
Don't.
You can still participate in the
Mr.
motion.
Food? Yes. Moved by Ms. Wick, seconded by Mr. Martin. Are there any opposed to approving the March meeting minutes?
I do have a question for Mr. Rudolph. Has the issue on the 5307 split been resolved yet?
It has not. It's the rest of the man.
No. Let the record show that Ms. Walsh has joined us. Sorry about that. You must have been raising it back. Yeah. Yeah, and then I got grabbed before you got in the door for another meeting. That's fine. How do you spell her name? First name? Last name?
Last name, Leon, L-E-O-N. First one is
Okay. Do you know how to spell his first name?
I'll look at it.
Okay, all right, just for the record, I want to make sure we have it.
It's not, you know,
We'd both rather be skiing, like I could show that.
yes.
So, oh wait, question. We still have a motion in front of us. Are there any opposed to approving the motion? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Moving right along, we are on to our first action item, transportation improvement program, number 9.
So, Madam Chair, what I did is I only printed out the one table and it was changing, but the full table was posted, so when the students are document, or recommend the students on that document, I just, this is what so the Transportation Alternatives Program, just to refresh folks' memory, this is, in previous years, we have had transportation enhancements, recreational trails, and safe routes to schools. And in MAP 21, they rolled it all into one program called the Transportation Alternatives Program. And we put out a call for nominations, I believe on February 11th, and which ended on March 14th for eligible projects. We received 9 projects. We small ranking committee got together and ranked and scored those based on 6 criteria. And we ended up with the list that is before you. So we had 4 years of funding, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Clearly, since it's 16, all of those funds are available today. The 2013 funds need to be spent before the end of this fiscal year, so basically we would need to obligate those in July, August timeframe to make sure we use those funds. The rest of the funds have a longer timeframe, but those 2013 funds need to be spent right away, obligated right away, so we can get moving on that. So we have the 2 pieces of paper before you would be the memo, which shows the projects that were recommended for approval. There were 2 projects that were below the funding line. So I gave all the committee members copies of all the nominated projects, including the 2 that we did not fund. The scores are there, the funding lines are there, and then the table out of the tip shows our sense for the schedule on those, which ones to go right away, et cetera, et cetera. I guess I can answer questions at this point if folks have them.
You have comments about any questions you do through the chair. On the Vision Zero program, there are a number of items that are listed that for implementation, some of them would be possibly planning type activities, and some would actually require either possibly some construction, like Safe Routes to School program, or design oversight and some of those other things. So this Vision Zero program, in order to actually obligate the funds, would need to have some specificity with deliverables and distinction between whether it's a planning activity that could be fully obligated or whether it's going to be involved design construction, and that would be something to discern. And so that's a comment about the first project. I think for the funding can actually be obligated. There needs to be specific deliverables and distinction between design and planning.
And my plan is to sit down with that was nominated by the municipality. So sit down with those folks and get them to give us a lot more specificity so that we could actually write up a Torah to show, the deliverables and what can be done when and the schedule and all that sort of stuff, so that we can feel better about funding that project. Obviously, the number one sort of project, they can kind of, according to the term, they kitchen sink it, they just put updates to all the non-motorized plan, for this, look at that. We still like the project, we just,
Thanks.
in years past, when we have projects that have been nominated for our own tip with our allocation, we have had similar situations where the nomination is pretty sparse. And we just we start with that, and then when we go to write up the Torah, we think that this is what we're looking for, so.
And one more comment here. And also any, like the ones that actually will be construction, like Westchester is doing federal rehab, Ashford Hills Connector Phase 2. Even though they've already been through a design process, because we have federal highway fund, we'll probably back up a little bit, and chances are these numbers will go up because of the need for to have a project manager shepherd it through the federal highway process. And so that's something else to consider as these funds get obligated. That there's probably gonna have to be some design efforts, possibly permitting, just working with the municipality on the environmental process. I understand the need to get money obligated, don't know.
Was that the question? Okay, Ms. Walker. Just what exactly do the estimates include?
The nomination forms show their proposed budgets, so they should be in there. I know for the Westchester Lagoon trail. They show money for design has already been utilized through the grant from Thompson Phillips. So $100,000 for their design. I know for that project they have their core permit in place already. So there are some things that they already have in place, but I don't know whether they follow the new process. It's clear that you can do the federal funds, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we made up because it could affect, the timing, the year in which those funds would be out. Mr. Rudolph?
What were the scores of the other two projects that didn't get nominated?
So the Fish Creek Trail Extension got 45 points, it was one lower than the lowest. And the Trails Plan update, there was a separate project to update the Trails Plan, and that project got a 43. Again, that project is part of the Vision 01 to update it. So
That one will be incorporated.
we scored it based on the scope as they had written it up. But we knew that it was included in the Vision 0 program, so we were confident when they came up there. So they were close.
Alice joined us.
We're on a few action rounds together.
So before us, gentlemen, right now, we're looking at, item 5A. Craig just gave us a brief update on the TAP program analysis, and we were looking at the memo that was provided showing the 7 projects. There were 9 that were submitted, 7 that actually ended up falling within the funding limit of what we could provide. So, are there any other questions from the committee at this time?
Actually, yeah, follow-up question on the cost. For example, I'm just need to be educated, I guess, things are listed, but take the item 3 ASD bike share education trailers and go to the back of the packet and shows total project cost of $85,030. And here it's $136,048.
So when we got to the funding line, which was at number 7, we had 200 and some odd thousand left. Not enough to pay for all that Fish Creek Trail extension, and it would have been probably enough to do the Airway Trails, but the Airway Trails is already up in Vision 0. So we talked to them and said, hey, is there a possibility of you doubling the amount of trailers that you buy? Can you get the match for that? And we were assured that they could get the match, so we thought it made sense. That was one of the 2 easiest ones to throw additional funding at to allow them to increase the spread of that project.
Okay.
We also added more funds into the multimodal volumes for the same amount.
Okay, so the allocations don't necessarily match the project cost.
Everything else does except for those 2 things, number 2 and number 3.
That's fine. I always find the typos too, it's just weird.
I'm sure you'll find typos. Those 2 were on purpose.
Okay, thank you.
And just a reminder, this is staff's recommendation. The TAC can recommend something completely different, and then the policy committee can certainly do something different. So if you decide you want to residual down there at the bottom and don't spend any extra on the whatever projects or move them around however you want. This is just using the criteria and people coming up with our suggestions.
I do have a question. Just this is actually for you guys, Craig, on the Vision 0, do you all believe that there's enough detail here that all the meetings won't be a problem? This is kind of not really kitchen sink, but there's a lot in here that's not got a lot of stuff.
Well, I guess that brings us to Jennifer's comments about we need to give it a little more fine tuning. Oftentimes in the TIP, we will have projects that are nominated and they'll have less information than we actually have in these forms. Of course, a lot of times those are construction projects, so that's a little more of a known sort of thing. Our plan is to meet with the project sponsors and emphasize very clearly that we need to get a lot more information on what they actually plan to do and when they plan to do it, what the deliverables are. Before we feel comfortable doing that.
So what do you think is the timeframe for that compared to, since you have kind of a short obligation process? Do you feel like you have enough time to define that and have some assurance that these numbers are
I
good?
plan on having that meeting next week, so I hope to get that information as quickly as possible so that when we're at the policy committee, we can get them updated.
Okay, thank you.
In 2 weeks.
Any other questions? Nothing immediately, I'm gonna open it to public comment at this time. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak or ask questions about item 5A that's in front of us, transportation improvement program, remember to please state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Steve Cleary. I'm with Alaska Trails. I'm really delighted to see this TAP process moving forward. My one question, maybe it's for staff, is whether or not they thought to wait till next year to obligate the 2016 funds. I know, for instance, the Trails plan hasn't been updated since 1997, and there'll probably be things in there that will require funding, and so I don't know if it was like an economy of scale of doing it all in one nomination process, or if there was any thought to saving that money and obligating it in the next round. Thank you.
The way we show it in the tip itself, we show 1.4 million obligated in as soon as possible sort of thing, and then the other money in 2017, that's 2.1 million. So we have to obligate $869,595 before the end of this fiscal year. Those funds need to be obligated or they go away. The rest of it can theoretically wait, and several of those projects on their nomination forms showed 2017. So those are the ones that we put in 2017, showing that those can wait. The other ones, either we're ready to go or we want to get done right away.
Actually, if I may, too, in response to your question, that page of the Trails plan, which was included in Division 0,
Right.
is something, because it's a planning study, would be a possible logical one to obligate first, because it could be, it's not a design construction type activity. And so those are the kinds of things, I mean, to ensure that we don't lose the funding, that first $870,000 needs to go to the low hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it, the ones that could be certain obligations.
The idea was to do one process, because all of the funds are available right now, and do one nomination process, get all of the suggested projects, and go and try to get all of it done right away. We could have done, I guess, a 2-year process or a 3-year process and just keep, 8 nominations every year, but we could also give another one go through.
And I think that was kind of his question, is the question of whether or not you intend on doing an annual, because as we work on the area-wide trails update, perhaps there's a really high priority project within the area-wide trails plan that could then be funded with the following year's TAP funds, and I think that was kind of the flavor of your question.
Yep.
Right, and if you remember, we brought the schedule and the scope, et cetera, to this committee and said, here's our idea, and we were told to go forth and conquer, so that's what we did. Just real quickly as to the area-wide trails plan. A lot of work has been done on that plan already for the update. We basically have done several extensive public involvement process, and we are in the process of creating a draft. And so there's a lot of work that has already been done. It probably doesn't need that much to finish off, but the challenge has been finding the staff time to devote to it. So that one is ready to start working on today to finish it off. It won't be a chunk of change because it is halfway through and it's a planning document. If I remember correctly, the bike and ped plan when they were done before, they were somewhere between $70,000 and $90,000. They were done in-house. They were not sent out to a contractor, but it's not a lot of money in any of those, but it's relatively quick.
This is the tip admin mod number 9, but it's for the tab.
Hearing no other questions, I will ask you.
Move to approve. As recommended.
Second. So moved by Mr. Wells, second by Ms. Walsh. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, we recommend approval of the bill. Admin mod number 9. On a personal note, my staff thanks you because the multimodal bonding partners are for my staff to help support pretty much every project that goes on in the municipality of Anchorage, whether it's state or municipal. And we're really looking forward to having more of that data available because it's very important. And we'll be doing it by hand, and this is going to allow us a much more streamlined way of doing so. So, thank you.
And with the increasing emphasis in the performance measures, we have information on roads and buses, but we just don't have non-motorized, and that's something that's very important to them and to us. So this will really help our work going forward.
Next up is general information, item 6A, English bus transit update. And I know you have PowerPoint presentation, so.
I have a point of general information that at the manager's meeting this week, Chris, Judy, and Lance, talked about how terrible the projector is. And Chris is supposed to be working with Lance.
The one that's not turning on? That
Yeah.
one? There we go.
We're working on getting it replaced, and some of it maybe Lance suggested some money for some of
Oh, like I said,
He said he could help pay for it.
okay, just pay for the entire sound system.
Correct.
Are we doing that?
I had Tana check with me, and Development Services does 30% of the activity here. So we're gonna check you too, we're gonna lay it out. I don't know, what kind of grant legislation do you know?
Okay, for those who don't know me, my name is Bart Rudolph. I'm the planning manager for the Public Transportation Department here in Communities. I want to introduce Colin Hodges, who's our transit planner as well. So him and I together have been working on a project called Anchorage Bus Transit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means as far as what we're looking at. But just real quick about our system right now, we have about 14, or we do have 14 bus routes, 1,000 bus stops. Our buses travel over 6,000 miles every weekday, and we carried 3.6 million passengers last year. We haven't changed our routes in any kind of significant fashion since 2002 when we did a route redevelopment plan. And that's when we got some initial ideas such as doing some 30-minute headways, time transfers. We started looking at transit hubs. My favorite part about the 2002 plan is this cool map that they produced. But it's important because it gives us the backbone of the system that we have today. It's the downtown transit as the system hub, and we've got satellite hubs at Muldoon, Diamond, and then we kind of got one at UAA as well now. So what was done in 2002 is still happening today. And in 2009, we did another study just to check the status of those recommendations. And we added in a few more minor things, but nothing major has really changed since then. As part of this project, we looked at a couple of indicators. Investment, that's the level of service hours that we provide per capita. Relevance, right below that, that's boardings per capita. Our ridership is right there, and our productivity, that's boardings per service hour. And the thing to note here is that 2008 was the peak for most of these. Over the last decade, we've been about the same. If you compare 2003 to 2013 on here, we're pretty much the same, a flat line, but since 2008, there has been a very gradual decline. And with that kind of trajectory, it kind of leads itself to looking at our system becoming less relevant, less productive, if this trend continues. So we thought it might be time to just check to make sure that the system that we have in place today is the system that we still want to have. And to do that, we're going to have a community dialogue. That's what we've coined Anchorage Talks Transit. It's all focused on making choices. We're not really interested in coming up with a long-term plan, because if you ask somebody what they want out of transit, they're going to say they want it to come to their door. They want it every 15 minutes. They want it on all the routes. Well, we can't do all that because we operate within a budget, just like many of you guys do with your department. So this discussion is all about making trade-offs and talking about values rather than choices. And we hired Jared Walker and Associates to do this. And one of the main reasons why we did that is the way that he communicates transit to people who don't understand the technical aspects. And what he says is you don't have to understand the technical aspects. The choices that we make are strictly value-driven. If we understand the values of the community, we as technical experts can design a system around that. So I'm going to go over kind of how we're presenting this to the public here in a second. But the main thing is that the event is May 5th, and Jared Walker is going to come up, and we're going to have the community dialogue at May 5th. It's going to be at the Anchorage Museum. I'll do some more about this in a second. Right now, we're getting the word out. We're going to community councils, any organization that will have us, just to explain what Choices is, try to get their interest peaked so that they'll come to the event, and then we'll have a web survey, and we'll do some follow-up with all those committees and organizations in May and June. Basically, Choices means that we want the ideal bus system for Anchorage living within our means. So we know we're not going to get a windfall of additional local cash or anything like that, so we need to make a system that works for us right now, and so that's what this is all about. This is copied from Jared Walker. We just got the first deliverable in this project, and it's the Choices report, and it kind of outlines this. So a lot of what you see here is outlined in that report, which is available online. Basically, a lot of people think that if ridership goes down, that the transit agency might not be completing their goals, or that they might be failing in one area, but sometimes ridership is not the only goal. Sometimes it's coverage. And so this is a little exercise that we'll use with the community. And this is a fictitious town, and all those dots represent population or employment centers or areas of activity. The gray lines are the roads that the buses could travel on, and then you can see in the corner there, those are the number of buses that we could fund. So for instance, if we had just a ridership goal, you would put all those buses where the population is on those two major streets, and you'd have a bus coming very frequent, serving just those areas. But if you lived outside of that, you would have to walk a little further, or you may not have service at all. So this is more like a business model of running transit and having ridership as its only goal. The coverage goal, this is you spread your resources equally. You provide equal coverage to everyone, no matter what the population density was, what the activities were, but you'd have fewer buses going to fewer places. So the idea here is usually a transit system doesn't focus wholly on one or the other. There's somewhere in the spectrum that is ideal for Anchorage, and that's what we want to have a discussion about. Another choice, you can have direct routes, which means you don't have to transfer. The bus will take you from point A to point B, but a system map made up of this is going to be pretty confusing to understand. And you're going to have to wait for a bus. As you can see in this example, there's only 2 buses going to that bottom dot. Or you can have an easier system to read, but you may have to transfer, and you also may have to walk a little bit more to the bus stop, but a bus is going to come more often. So again, neither one of these is wrong. It's just where do we want to be? A final one here is, all about travel time. A lot of times people compare buses to cars, and they say, well, it takes me too long. So if you want to go that route, if that wants to be your performance measure, then you look at bus stops. Do you want to walk far for a bus stop and have fewer of them so the bus travels, or do you not want to walk as far but the bus has to stop along the way? So just some examples of easy choices that we'll been presenting to the public to get them interested to come to the event, and then we kind of apply this to Anchorage. So after you understand what some of the easy choices are, here's what it means for Anchorage. So right now, we probably have a mostly radial network. And usually a radial network centers around one node of major employment or activity, and then you bring everyone in from around that to the center point. Anchorage probably has, about 3 of those, as I mentioned before, if you count Muldoon or the Diamond Center. We're not as drastic as a center radial network, but 13 of our 14 bus routes go downtown. So our transfers are timed there, which means it's easy to transfer downtown, but if you're along one of the routes, it may be a little harder. You might have to wait a little bit more for a transfer. Part of that is what we have right now as a street network, and this is you can see the downtown area. If a bus stop is within a half a mile as the crow flies, it probably is a half-mile walking distance because of the grid network, or pretty close to that. But more in South Anchorage, if the bus stop is within a half mile of you as the crow flies, chances are you're going to have to walk a lot more than a half mile to get to that bus stop. So this kind of presents three choices that we're sort of forced with. You know, we could do a gridded network up top and a more circuitous network that winds through the neighborhood at the bottom and try to connect the two. We could do a very productive high-frequency network that just travels on the main roads, the ones that connect north, south, and east, west. But that probably means you're going to leave half of the people outside of the walking distance to meet those routes. Or you could sort of do, what we do now is run circuitous routes all over, which means they wind through the neighborhood so that everybody is almost within some sort of walking distance to the bus lines. Again, none of them are wrong, but is that what we still want to continue to do? Another thing we got to think about is if we want a high-frequency network, meaning that if you want a network that's based on transfers, you have to look at what it actually takes to transfer. And I'll be honest, I picked one of the more extreme examples here in Anchorage, and this is Lagos and Tudor. But to transfer here, you have to walk an eighth of a mile. You have to cross this intersection. So all that takes time. So if we're going to go to a more frequent network, we need to look at where our bus stops are placed. And that's, one of the reasons why we're engaging this group and talk about maybe transit-supported corridors, what that means, and where bus stops are placed. I'll talk a little bit more about that too. And I know that it's sort of a faux pas to talk about Portland when you do planning here in Anchorage, but I wouldn't be a good planner if I didn't bring up a Portland example. Plus, Jared Walker is from Portland, so this is his picture. But this is bus stops that are placed really closely together that if you transfer, you may not have to walk at all to transfer. They're right there, or you walk a very short distance. So if this is something that we want to move toward, this would be a discussion that we would need to start having. Complexity or connections. East Anchorage is served by 8 bus routes, meaning that if you live in East Anchorage, you probably don't have to walk very far to a bus. They're going to go circuitous through the neighborhood, but it also means that all of those 8 routes go back downtown. And there's only a few ways to go downtown, so that means those roads are kind of have duplicate service, if you will. So if ridership was our main goal, those routes are essentially competing against each other because the ridership is going to be spread amongst many instead of one. So again, this may be right. There's pros and cons to both, but this is just another example. This is my favorite thing that's come out of this choices report. It's just a way of looking at our system. A lot of time when you look at a bus system, you see the route lines that cross each other. You don't know how frequent they are, so you might assume that you can transfer, but you may need to look at a schedule or you need an app really to understand it. So this is color coded, so the red or the pinkish, that's a bus every 20 minutes. The blue is a bus every 30 minutes, and the green is a bus every 60 minutes. So if you're crossing at a green light or transferring and you're just looking at a map, you may not know that you may have to wait up to an hour to do that transfer. You're going to need some sort of an app or a schedule to really understand how the system works. So by presenting it this way, we kind of have a holistic view of our frequency of our network and whether you really can do transfers easily without a schedule. Another thing to point out here, the top part, Tudor and above, you can kind of see a rectangle of the majority of our service. So if we were going to move to our ridership-based model, chances are we would probably strengthen coverage there, and South Anchorage would be kind of left a little less than what it has now, and so that's another trade-off. So we've also done our due diligence and looked at a bunch of factors, as you would, to see what would make the ideal transit neighborhoods, where would transit riders be coming from, things like that. And Colin put together this great transit propensity map that kind of takes all of that into account. And the hot spots, the red areas, kind of look at where ridership should be high. This is like high attractors by taking in all of those things that I just showed on that slide. And just to see what our existing system looked like, we put our existing routes on there. Those are our purple lines. And probably by no accident from the 2002 study, our routes pretty much hit all of those spots. So it kind of leads us to believe that we are going for a coverage model. You know, the transit system that we have in place has a coverage component that we want to hit all these areas. Question is, do we want to continue doing that, or do we want to focus on the more highly concentrated areas and at different frequencies? So there's two main choices that really came out of this choices report that we have to talk about, and that's going to be this main fifth dialogue. And it's, we have a 50-50 ratio probably now for service coverage and maximizing ridership. Again, that may be the right mixture for Anchorage. It may not be. We don't have to decide on a number through these dialogues, but what's important is to have the acknowledgement that this choice exists, so that when people are looking at our transit system or talking to their neighbors about transit, it's not always about ridership or coverage. They can have a discussion that maybe which they value more, and we can start focusing our efforts on one maybe more than the other. The other choice is the level of investment. How much transit do we really want in Anchorage? Is the level of investment that we have now correct? We compared ourselves with 9 cities. The 2 on the right are Canadian cities. But the top is the level of investment. That's the number of hours of service we have per capita. So we're kind of right in the middle compared to the U.S. cities. And then the bottom is kind of like you get what you pay for. This is the relevance. This is the ridership per capita. So usually there's a correlation. If you increase your investment, you should increase your ridership in some fashion or another. And you can see that most systems do, but it's directly correlated to the transit investment table. And we're right in the middle. So maybe that's right for us. So May 5th is the big event. It's at the Anchorage Museum. Jared Walker will come up and we'll have this whole discussion, he'll outline choices, and he'll do it in a lot better way than I just did here. And then we'll have some discussions afterwards that talk about what the ideal transit system for Anchorage really means to the people that were there. We're going to have an invitation stakeholder workshop following that public event. So all the major stakeholders that we've identified, it's been about 80 so far. Someone from AMATS and many of the departments that are represented here will get an invite soon. The mayor has really taken this on as a project that he wants to help and support, so he's directly inviting these stakeholders to this event. And basically, if you don't know what a string exercise is when you talk about transit, you'll get a piece of string maybe this big, and that represents service every 60 minutes, because that's what you can afford. You can wrap that string throughout the city however you'd like. But service every 30 minutes probably costs, you only get about this much of a string that costs the same amount. So then your string is shorter where you have higher frequencies, and then 15 minutes. So we'll do exercise like that and talk about frequency and coverage at the same time, living within our existing budget and resources. Those will be presented at the stakeholder workshop, all the different types that the groups come up with. That's Michelle from Jared Walker and Associates, so she'll be here as well. After the public event, we'll have a MetroQuest survey. So if people weren't able to come, we're going to post this survey. And this goes through what I just talked about, how choices influence transit. People will start by ranking their priorities. So in this particular example, I just picked shorter travel times, fewer transfers, service in busy places, less pollution, and a simpler network. Those would be my top 5 priorities if I was taking this survey. Then you go through and you do that little exercise that I explained. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it tells you how that relates to the priorities that you just identified, which is a pretty neat way of easily explaining, okay, you think you want this, but now let's see how it measures up to what you also said are your priorities. And now they can star it, so there's 5 stars up top, and they'll give it a rating based on the information that they just learned. And then finally, it's the spending priorities. It's, you only have so much, where do you want to put your budget type deal. So we'll get those results back, we'll have the dialogue, and then we're going to go back out to those committees.
Can I ask a question? Okay, I was just wondering if they found in some places, maybe you guys will find this out later after you do the study, but, or you do this project, but if you increase the ridership, can you then increase the coverage? Like, will that provide the funding to potentially increase your coverage?
Probably not entirely, so we only get about 20% of our budget from fares.
Okay.
So if you increase your ridership, you're only gonna get about 20%, you know, of what it actually costs to operate that line.
I wonder if like, you could get more dollars or federal dollars or something, if you can show increased revenue. I don't know what grants you guys have applied for.
Right, and if there was grants that were focused on one or the other, and we could prove one, then that would be the way to do it now. Usually there are a whole litany of things like economic impact, service coverage. So our next steps, we hope to identify some really, as Jennifer put, low-hanging fruit that we can implement right away with our existing service change that's coming up in around August. Some of the more complex things that will come out of this, if we're going to really realign our routes and look at frequencies and things like that, we'll do that. That will correspond to possibly the renovation of the downtown transit center, when we have to start relocating some of our routes for the detours of that. That'll be March 2017. Whatever we can do within our existing budget between those two service changes, we'll create a plan to do in the next 1 to 5 years, hopefully. And then to be involved in the MTP, the MUNI, the planning department, the AMATS, they're talking about things like transit supported corridors, TOD development. There's a land use plan update, that propensity map that I showed led right into that, so I helped identify some of these transit supported corridors. And if we want a high frequency network that is on these corridors, we can help identify those corridors and help plan roads and projects that help what we've identified here through this process. So it's the real short version of our choices report where we're going next. So if you have any questions.
So what impact, there was some discussion, I don't know where it is, about moving the hub to the Midtown area. How does that tie into this analysis?
So we're no longer pursuing the Midtown Transit Center. What we hope to do is have our routes identify where the transit centers need to be. So like I mentioned, the radial network. Once we define what our system's gonna look like, maybe redesigned here, that'll tell us where we need a transit center. So we're not doing anything until we finish this. Gary.
Gary Cassian. How did the projects that were identified in the 2035 interim MTP, the frequency changes and things like that play into the system or this study?
So anything that's been identified so far, either in the MTP or a neighborhood plan, we're keeping out of this discussion right now because we just want to focus on values. And then we can start plugging through some of those that have already been identified. Because we don't want to lose some of that, because especially some of these community plans, there's been a lot of input already on what they want transit to look like. But those plans didn't have the other part that says, okay, you can have that, but what should we give up as part of that? And if you do that neighborhood by neighborhood, that's not going to work. You have to do that community-wide.
I'm curious, on the slide comparing with 8 city comparisons,
Mhm.
how difficult is it to account for the extraneous variables on comparing Anchorage to other places? You know, I'm thinking Anchorage is the 64th largest city in the United States, Buffalo's 76th. Bellingham's an interesting example. I mean, this is a very unique situation. So
It is. So these cities were chosen because they were the most similar in size, both in population and transit service, as well as ridership. So we try to pick northern winter cities. You know, nothing's going to be perfect, but these are the closest ones that we had that did transit and population that were similar to ours.
So from back here, I can't read those names. Can you tell us who they are?
Oh, sure. Anchorage, Bellingham, Boise, Buffalo, Eugene, Green Bay, Salem, Spokane, and the two Canadian ones are Halifax and Victoria.
So I noticed on this graph, some of these actually went down instead of up, which I didn't expect. So is that something that you guys, as you're going through this process, that your contractor is kind of helping us with, from a lessons learned standpoint, what not to do?
Right, so this is all about maybe those didn't have a ridership focus, you know. So as we go through, we're gonna examine what they did, what they changed, and what they came out of. Because, you know, if we decide that ridership's not our main and only goal, it may be okay that we give up some of the ridership per capita if we're providing more coverage to more people, and we just expect more empty buses. It'd be okay. You know, because if somebody rides on a busy bus at school, they're gonna wonder why we don't have more buses on that route. And then somebody might say, well, in order to do that, we have to take a route away from a low producing route. Well, then someone will come back and say, well, now you just took a route away from somebody who needs and depends on it, you know, so.
Or do they have the capability of modeling the impacts of some of these decisions, like if you start favoring ridership more than coverage? I mean, do they have a way to sort of measure what the expected impact might be?
It's like forecasting what
Yeah.
potential ridership. I don't know if they do or not. It's not part of this project right now. It's something we could probably explore if we need to answer some of those questions. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Amazing metaphor. For some reason, this evaluation, I was part of the discussion, we were talking about scoping of this, and made me think about when I was a little kid and having to realize the balance. And I go to a store and, you know, I want everything. Well, I want the toy, I want the candy, I want everything. And when I was younger, I was very much the first thing, I want that. My mom's like, okay, but if you get that, you don't get anything else. But I was a kid, I wanted instant gratification, I get that, and then, you know, next thing you're like, oh, but I want that too and that too. I mean, the older I got, the more I was discerning and really evaluating my value and going, I don't really want the candy. I want the stuffed animal that's gonna last a long time. My mom said I did a really good job of evaluating that the older I got. I hope I'm really good at doing that now, but I mean, that's really what this process is. People try to encourage what do you really
What
want.
do you really want? Can't have it all.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited to see the results and be involved in it. All right. So next before us are the committee comments. Let me get in the order. Mr. Hanson?
Just to reminder, April 25th in this room, 1 to 3 is the annual construction coordination meeting, where all municipal projects, DOT participates, utilities, AWW. Just has a list of all the projects that we would go on this summer.
And representatives from all the different
Yes.
places discussing.
So,
There's a lot of,
and we'll be providing maps, we'll get accumulating all of the projects from all the, we've got the input form, we have all the maps. It usually looks like, holy crap, what am I gonna do this summer? It's not all going on at the same time. So but it does give all the major, some of the major projects, you can see what's happening.
One other thing, this weekend, you've probably been hearing it on the news or seeing it, in the advertisements, it's a good weekend to avoid the Glen Muldoon area. There's gonna be a closure at Muldoon and Boundary, and also for the access to that area, so, the access to Cotton Center or to and from Muldoon will be circuitous and probably frustrating. The closure starts at, I think 8 p.m. Friday, and it's scheduled for 3 days. And so Monday's gonna be a bit of a challenge, give yourself extra time. And if you're heading out of town, it's good to do. So just,
but don't use more than get out of town.
yeah, don't use more.
Is that why you're going to Hawaii this weekend?
Exactly. It's already starting.
There,
It's getting close.
planning to make any announcements?
I was gonna make a comment.
You were?
Everybody else, but I want to be the last.
Oh, okay. Any other committee comments? Exactly.
Well, you'll be happy to hear this is my last TAC meeting.
No, we're not happy.
So, yeah, I'm retiring as of May 6th, and my replacement, Deanne Betco's here. She's the new deputy director, or will soon be the new deputy director, and she's agreed that, I told her how much fun this body is.
So you're right.
And she'll be a great addition, very organized. She'll be, I'm sure she'll be a great contributor to the committee. It's been fun. Been associated with this committee, I think, for close to 25 years. So, I'm off to spend more time with Dickens' wife and father. Not in order.
Okay. And following up that announcement, and maybe the end, right?
Yes.
Can verify that I believe there's a retirement party from 11:30 to 1 on April 29th
Correct.
at the HHS. And bring a Easter appetizer. And I think everyone's welcome, right?
Absolutely.
Send you off in style.
Steve, it's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Did you tell her she had the right mic? No, everyone
Still
is
working
right.
on that.
I'd like everybody to join me in a round of applause. It really has been a pleasure. I appreciate it. You've taught me a lot. I can't believe I've now been part of this body for 5 years. It seems kind of weird, but I've appreciated all the knowledge and value you brought to the committee. It's been wonderful and valuable.
I usually cry. I'm for something like that.
It means it's a good choice at the right time.
Yeah.
It is, means it's the right time. So. All right, are there any public comments before we adjourn? All right, there's a lot of meetings upcoming next week, actually a week from yesterday, I believe, and at 3:30 in the afternoon, I believe in this room, is the Freight Advisory Committee meeting. And there is going to be a representative from FHWA. They're going to be looking at the freight freight mobility study. So that one will be interesting. I really wanted to be there, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to. And 2 weeks from today is the policy committee meeting, so they'll be making the final decision on that one. So if you're interested in that, I'd recommend going to that. If there's nothing else, then
A question. Do you think the assembly will have their new members on it? Or no, it'll be. I think.
They get out the first
Well, so
Tuesday.
they have a vote on it.
I assume they're reorganizing.
Yeah. Be a good chance to look at how the assembly person in action.
What do you say?
Yeah, it could be.
I guess that's the question. Is that the assembly members that are on the
Yeah.
policy committee, how are they selected?
Those are appointed by the assembly chair,
Okay,
so it's up to them.
okay.
And sometimes it's